Imagine, it's a Friday afternoon, February 1977. The sky over West Wales is a bruised purple, heavy with the threat of rain. In the small village of Broadhaven, the school bell just rang for recess. A group of 15 children, ages 9 to 11, are scattered across the asphalt playground, lost in games of tag and football. Suddenly the game stopped. One boy points towards the ridge just beyond the perimeter fence. There, hovering silently over a cluster of trees, is a craft that defies every law of aviation they've ever seen. It's silver, shaped like a giant cigar or a flattened disc, with a shimmering translucent dome on top. The children don't just see a machine. They see a passenger. A towering figure, just over 7 feet tall, clad in a seamless silver one-piece suit, standing motionless in the tall grass. Panic erupts. The children scramble back towards the school doors, some screaming, and others paralyzed by primal fear. Today we're traveling back to 1977 to investigate one of the most credible, documented, and baffling UFO flaps in British history, the Broadhaven Triangle, also known as the Welsh Triangle. For a few intense months, this quiet seaside community in Pembrokeshire became the epicenter of a paranormal storm. We're talking about hundreds of sightings, secret government memos, and a mystery that nearly 50 years later is still unsolved. Was it a genuine extraterrestrial visitation, a sophisticated military experiment, or a masterpiece of a local prankster? To find out, we have to look at the evidence, the witnesses, and the classified files that the Ministry of Defense tried to keep under wraps. Broadhaven is a postcard-perfect village nestled on St. Bride's Bay. In the late 1970s, it was a place that nothing ever happened. It was a community of farmers, fishermen, and small business owners. But Broadhaven had two neighbors that would later become central to this mystery. First was RAF Brodie, a Royal Air Force base that was just a few miles up the coast. In 1977, Brodie was a hive of activity, hosting Sea King helicopters and the revolutionary Harrier jump jets, aircraft capable of hovering vertically, a sight that could easily be mistaken for something otherworldly by the uninitiated. Second, there was the Milford Oil Refinery. This is a crucial detail. Workers at the refinery wore bulky, silvery, fire-resistant suits to handle gas fires. As we'll see, these suits eventually gave skeptics their strongest smoking gun. But in 1977, the world was already primed for the paranormal. Close Encounters of the Third Kind was the talk of the cinema, and had transitioned into an era of UFO fever. In Britain, the mysterious Warminster Thing of the 1960s had set the stage. But no one expected a sleepy Welsh village to become the next global headline. When those 15 children burst back into the school on February 4th, their teacher was dismissive. Overactive imaginations, they said. A prank to get out of class. But the headmaster, Ralph Leland, noticed something unsettling. The children weren't laughing. They were terrified. One boy was in hysterics, convinced that the creature was coming to get them. Leland decided to conduct a controlled experiment. He separated the children into different rooms, gave them paper and crayons, and told them to draw exactly what they had seen. When he collected the drawings, his skepticism vanished. Every single sketch was nearly identical. They all showed a silver, cigar-shaped craft with a dome. Many included the Silver Man, standing nearby. The consistency was impossible to ignore. One student, David Davies, had actually been inside during the initial sighting. Curious, he went out to the field later that afternoon. He claims that he saw the object firsthand. A silver craft with a pulsating red light that emitted a low, vibrating hum before shooting into the clouds at impossible speeds. The schoolyard sighting was just the beginning. Once the local newspapers ran the headline, "Spaceman, Mystery of the Terror Triangle," the floodgates opened. By the end of 1977, over 450 separate incidents were reported in the region. It wasn't just lights in the sky. It was high strangeness. Farmers reported their cattle being moved miles away into locked fields overnight. Car engines stalled as glowing orbs passed overhead. Televisions spontaneously combusted or melted. The community was divided. Some residents were so frightened, they sent their children to stay with relatives in the inland towns. Others, fueled by the media circus, began UFO hunting. On the cliffs of Littlehaven, the West Wales flap had officially begun. In April 1977, the mystery moved from the playground to the parlor. Rosa Granville, the respected owner of the Haven Fort Hotel, was awakened at 2:30 a.m. by a sound she described as a low-frequency thrum that vibrated the very foundation of her hotel. Looking out her window at the sea cliff, she saw a craft she described as an upside-down saucer or a glowing jellyfish. It was pulsating with light so bright that it turned the night into day. She claimed that she could feel heat radiating through the glass. In the field stood two figures, over 6 feet tall, faceless and clad in white or silver boiler suits. They appeared to be scanning the ground with handheld devices. Rosa shouted at them, but they remained eerily indifferent. By the time she roused her guest, the craft had vanished, leaving behind a circular patch of scorched earth, and a woman that would spend the rest of her life insisting she had seen the impossible. Perhaps the most harrowing account came from Billy and Pauline Coombs at Ripperston Farm. Their experience felt less like a visit and more like a siege. On the night of April 23rd, their television began to spark and emit thick black smoke. Outside, their dog was howling in a way that Billy described as pure agony. When Billy pulled back the living room curtains, he found himself inches away from a 7-foot-tall spaceman, peering through the glass. The figure had no visible eyes, nose, or mouth, just a dark, reflective visor. It stood there for several seconds, a silent sentinel in the Welsh night, before turning and walking away with a strange, mechanical gait into the darkness. The police officer that responded to their call later stated, in 20 years on the force, he had never seen a family so genuinely traumatized. The Coombs family eventually abandoned the farm, unable to live with the memory of what had peered through their window that night. While the public was debating aliens, the British government was watching. Publicly, the Ministry of Defense was dismissive. Privately, they were scrambling. Declassified files now show that the MOD's UFO desk, known as Desk S4, ordered a discreet inquiry. They sent Flight Lieutenant Tony Cowan from RAF Brodie to interview the witnesses. Cowan's internal memos are fascinating. While he found no evidence of a landing, he was deeply impressed by the sincerity of Rosa Granville and the school children. One classified memo from June 1977 requested a discreet inquiry by the RAF's provost and security services, the military's internal police. They weren't looking for little green men. They were looking for Soviet spies or secret technology. They concluded that the case had no defense significance, but the sheer volume of paperwork suggests that they were far more worried than they let on. In 1996, the mystery took a turn towards the terrestrial. A man named Glenn Edwards came forward with a confession. He claimed in 1977 he and his friends from a local farmers club had decided to capitalize on the UFO craze. They had obtained a silver fire-resistant suit from the oil refinery and spent several nights wandering the fields of Broadhaven, popping up near windows and hedges to scare the locals. Glenn even recounted a night where a farmer confronted him with a shotgun, nearly ending the prank and Glenn's life permanently. Skeptics also point towards the Harrier jump jets at RAF Brody. The Harrier, seen through the mist at a distance, can look like a cigar-shaped craft. Its engine makes a unique humming sound, and its ability to hover and suddenly zip away matches many of the kids' description. But the prank theory doesn't satisfy everyone. Could a man in a suit account for the scorched earth at the Haven 4 Hotel? Could a Harrier jet account for the poltergeist activity at the Ripperston farm? The school children, now in their 50s and 60s, have never recanted. In 2017, they gathered for the 40th reunion of the sighting. David Davies told reporters, "I know what I saw. It wasn't a man in a suit. And it wasn't a jet. It was something else." The consistency of the stories over 5 decades is the strongest evidence for the believers camp. In a world where people usually come clean about childhood pranks, the Broadhaven children have held their ground with a quiet, haunting conviction. So what is the truth of the Broadhaven Triangle? Was it a perfect storm of Cold War tension, military testing, and local pranksters? Or did a small Welsh village briefly become a window into another world? The Broadhaven mystery isn't just about aliens. It's about how a community reacts when the inexplicable knocks on their door. It's about the thin line between folklore and reality. Today, the village embraces its history. Tourists visit the UFO fields, and the school still teaches the story of the day the playground stood still. If you were standing on those cliffs in 1977, and you saw a silver giant emerging from the mist, would you trust your logic or your eyes? If you stuck with me all the way to the end of the video, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming videos. And remember, whether it be plane, train, or a UFO, there's always a story to tell.